Well, we are excited to be back. It's been a while. COVID kind of interrupted our plans for continued podcasting at America World, but Global Family's back, and how better to start it than to speak with my guest today, who's not really a guest. She's a part of America World also, Erica Ho. If you're watching, which is a new feature for us. If you're watching online at YouTube and the links that we provide, you can see Erica. She is down in the Nashville area, and Erica has been with us for what, about 6 years now?
Yeah, close to. In April, it'll be 6 years.
Yeah, and she's been really instrumental in so many things, America World. Your title, I've written it down here, Director of Missions and Communications, and that sounds like some kind of a government job.
It
But it's
does. It
not.
sounds like I work at NASA. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And some of the complicated things you do, it kind of fits the mold. So,
For
Erica,
sure.
I work directly with Erica on a lot of things. We both do a little bit of communications. We do a lot of website stuff, a lot of media like this. And, but today we want to talk to you as a mom. And
Mhm.
you're going to be on quite often, I believe, because you are the director of missions at America World, and we certainly want to talk about what's going on in missions as it relates to this COVID outbreak and as it relates to projects that we're doing overseas, because that's all a part of what America World does. In fact, I would say it's very equal with adoption. Is just that
Yeah,
orphan
for sure.
care facet of what America World does so important, which is, I think, people ask sometimes, why are you asking me for donations because I paid for my adoption? But that's not any, has nothing to do with adoption. It has everything to do with orphan care. So we'll talk about that sometime as well. But let's talk about Lola. Tell us, first of all, tell us a little bit about you and your family, and then share something about Lola with us. So, because she's going to be the centerpiece here today.
She is. Yeah. And that would thrill her to no end to know that
Yeah,
she's at
right.
school today and we're just discussing her and how great she is. But so, quick story of our family is we had two biological kiddos very close together. They're about 18 months apart, and by the time our second was about 6 months old, we were looking for an option to grow our family through specifically international adoption. And I have a lot of connections in the continent of Africa, working in various African countries, and Ethiopia was a program that was open at that time. And so we adopted our third child through the Ethiopia program as a baby. He was about 9 months old when he came home, and we just had just a really, honestly, his adoption was such a spiritual experience for us in growing our family. We were just really overwhelmed by like what we were allowed to do. We just kept saying, "Oh my gosh!" Like we we just traveled over to Ethiopia, and we did all these different things, and we have a son now because of this. And it was just really an unbelievable experience to us that we were trusted in that way, both by the government and the people there, and by God, that He would entrust us to kind of have that journey. Um, and he was just this amazing little guy, very sick, had a lot of recovery when we got him home, but we just immediately wanted to continue to grow our family through adoption. And while we were there, we were just really burdened for the older kids that we saw who didn't have families coming for them. Um, and so we just kind of started praying through, okay, we know that we want to adopt again, like really quickly. Which sometimes people advise against that, the experts will advise against that, but this was definitely, like I said, a lot of that was a spiritual experience for us, and we just felt God moving us in that direction of start your paperwork again. Like, I
Yeah.
know that you're not financially recovered. I know that this is a lot, having three kids under three, but you've seen the kids who are waiting, and so go after them basically. And so with our second adoption process, which we began pretty quickly after our first adoption process, we knew that we would adopt a child who was waiting, who was a little bit older, and who likely had some kind of medical or special need. And so we entered the China waiting program, which is a big program at America World. And
Yeah.
we began all the paperwork, and we were going a little bit slower because, we had 3 kids under 3, and we had just completed one adoption process. But
Yeah.
um, at 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 one point, we saw a little girl on a waiting page, who her name was, something else like Haley at the time, and that was Lola. Um, and started reading about her and learned that she had been waiting since she was about 6 months old. She was 4.5, 5 at the time,
Wow.
and put together the pieces that, she had been available for a family to pursue her for years and years, but was blind with no other medical conditions. And kind of for that reason, people were not pursuing her file. And Calvin and I, my husband, we talked and we were like, why are we waiting for a referral or waiting for a child that kind of matches these boxes that we thought we could handle, when there's a little girl, a healthy little girl, who just has waited so long, who's waited too long for somebody to say yes to her.
Yeah.
And so we contacted our agency, America World, at the time. I didn't work there at the time, but we were going through America World for our adoption, and Leah Rocky was our family coordinator.
Yeah.
And called her up and talked to her about it, and she said, this isn't something that you initially put on your list, so you'd have to amend your home study. And do you really understand it? And we honestly were in that boat of like, really, no, we have no idea. We don't actually know anybody who's blind. We don't really know what the resources are for us as a family to raise a child who's blind, but um, we just we just knew, she was ours, and if we could get her file, then we were going to pursue her. So long story short, America World did secure her file for our family with very little information. It was
Yeah.
almost crazy because, Haley wasn't even her name. It was like this blog name, and some people had been
Sure.
advocating for her. But we did secure her file and begin that process to adopt her.
That's a huge thing because we went through similar process, except back when we did it, it was predominantly quote unquote healthy girls from
Mhm.
China. It's not the case anymore. But what you did, like most people do, is they check the things they think they can handle. Obviously, God had a part of that, but blindness is, like you said, you didn't know anybody that was blind. That to me is a really scary step. Maybe even more so than hearing or hearing deficit or deafness or something, because I can't imagine life without seeing. So you guys really stepped into the unknown there. Like I said, of course, God was moving you in that direction. But that's one of the many things I really love about your adoption story is that this was truly a step of faith. And most people would listen to this and go, they had to be crazy, because that's a big undertaking. But you guys move
I
forward
think the
with
craziest
Leah's
thing
help.
was the amount of small kids in our house, really. But yeah, we
Yeah,
did
that
move
too.
forward.
Yeah,
Yeah. We moved forward, and the process was really fast. Like 11 months, Mike, which like that start to finish. That was from the time we turned in our, pre-application to America World to the time we were getting off a plane with her was 11 months.
which
Um,
is typically that is the case for an older child or a child, especially
mhm.
an older child with special needs. So if you're
Yes.
listening and you're considering, keep that in mind. Not that that should be a determining factor, but that is one benefit if you're looking to adopt more quickly. Certainly, the need is there, and that's why it's quicker.
Yes, if God has put it on your heart to grow your family and to move quickly, the the China Waiting Child program is a really good option for that.
Yeah.
And we were on top of our paperwork. We were desperate to have our family completed. So there was never a day when something was waiting to be done. And that's my personality. And, just as a mama hen, like wanting to have all
Yeah.
the chicks under the roof. I worked really fast, and every time something, came up to be due or whatever, we were filling it out quickly.
Yeah.
Um, but we kind of dove into this world getting ready for Lola of looking for other families who had adopted blind children, because we were just comparing it to bringing Liam home and the things that we had done to connect with him. And like so much of it was like eye contact and like just
Yeah.
those natural things we do with our little people. We're looking into their eyes and telling them how much we love them and making faces at them when they're babies and just all those things and going, well, none of that's going to work for one because she's 5 and she would think we're really strange. And two, she's not going to necessarily see all these things that we're trying to do. And then also thinking about, well, she speaks Mandarin, and um, is that going to be challenging to translate to English and teach her English when we can't, it's necessarily point at things and say what it is.
Yeah.
But I'll go ahead and cut that short and just say, like, none of that was even an issue. She learned English faster than any other kid in our travel group of 8 or so kids. Um, and we had some older kids in the mix and some younger kids in our travel group. And just her auditory processing was so heightened, that she
Yeah.
was
Sure.
just a master at learning English. It
Yeah.
was under 4 months and she was completely fluent.
Wow.
What we learned too, as far as resources, is that we have a great public school here. Lola attends the same school as her siblings. She has access to everything that her sighted siblings and peers do. So, things are translated to Braille, or, maps are made to be tactile, and all those services come through our school. And then we go to Vanderbilt Eye Institute a couple times a year, and they do some checkups and make sure the pressure in her eyes is okay. And her particular eye condition is a little bit rare. So when she came home, there was a lot of interest from the doctors to kind of come in and look at her eyes.
Sure.
Um, and there's not anything like surgically or medically that we can do to improve her vision, or to give her sight. A lot of people will ask about that too, but Lola has always been without her vision. And so that makes her very fearless, and that makes her have this just amazing ability to just do everything.
Yeah.
She's not afraid, and she's never had fear in her, especially with the background that she had. She was in an orphanage for 5 years, so there wasn't a mom following her around like a helicopter and making sure she didn't bump into anything.
Yeah.
So Lola jumps on a trampoline. She's learned to ride a bike. She runs cross country at her middle school. I do run as her guide runner for that. Um, and that's not something she could safely do independently, but there
Sure.
are such a large variety of things that she does independently or just with a small amount of help. Almost anything that my sighted kids do, Lola does too. She Yeah, it's just such a thing that it almost astounds me now that we were ever nervous or like looking for resources or trying to talk to other people who went through this, because she's such an individual. I don't even know if we could have compared our experience with her to someone else's, but um, just combined with the resources and just her tenacity and her desire to just live a really full life. I can't tell you I notice a huge difference in the home at all between my 4 kids, except in the way that maybe she has to complete her homework.
Yeah. Incredible. And I have been around her enough to kind of marvel at how she functions, because it is so normal. And so I've always been intrigued with your story, and then especially when I met her, and see how she just lives her life. So it's really amazing. Now, what I want to make clear here, and Erica, I don't know if you're still with me or not. It looks like you froze. Can you hear me?
You're coming back now.
Okay, good. So what I want to make clear here is that we're not saying everybody should adopt a special need child with blindness or any specific thing. We firmly believe that God is going to call you to do that. But I think one thing that really encouraged me from your story is that if God's calling you, take the step. You guys probably would have on your own never did that, but God was there walking you through it, and things turned out well. So if God's calling you, just like we say about finances, that's a big hurdle in adoption, and if God's calling you to do it, He'll provide. And Lola is living proof. What else do you want to tell us about her story, or just those who are considering adoption?
Well, I'll just to kind of conclude, because like all of our stories, it's ever evolving. She's growing, we're growing, but Lola has been home for about 8 years now. So I'm telling this story as somebody who has walked through the very dark and the very light and the very exciting and the very traumatic parts of adopting a child who's a little bit older. Um, and there's no part of our road that has really been, very straight and well planned out or anything like
Sure.
that. But every bit of it has been exactly what we felt God calling us to do the whole time. And you can really walk through anything when you know that. And He has shown up for us over and over again. And Lola has grown and grown and grown and flourished. And um, she's 13 years old this week. It was her birthday this
Wow.
week, and that's crazy. First of all, and it can be, you know, such a hard thing too to look back and go, "Gosh, you're 13, and I missed a big chunk of that." But God is
Yeah.
constantly redeeming that story, and giving us new moments and new things to build together, and we're finding creative ways to continue to connect and just get through all those things that are a little bit more difficult uh, in our situation. But like I said, God is going to lead you where He wants you, and then He's going to equip you. But the entire time, you have to be looking at Him, because if you lose sight for 1 second, you're going to sink, and you're going to lose
Yeah.
sight of what's going on. Lola gave her life to the Lord this year.
Wow. Praise
We
God.
we just have seen Him just be so faithful and so good in her story, and we know without a doubt, if a family had not said yes to her, if it was us, if we weren't her family, if I wasn't her mom, if Calvin wasn't her dad, would she have had that opportunity to know the Lord? Would she have been able to respond like that? And I can't tell you that she would have. and
Right.
um and so God is just constantly saying yes in her story, and growing her into something. So one day she's going to tell her own story, and I'm excited um, to hear her perspective, and all of that.
Absolutely. Well, Erica, we were going to have you back on because you're a part of this as much as I am, and you've got a lot of things to share. We want to talk about mission trips. We want to talk about orphans and projects that America World is doing to help children like Lola and so many others who are kind of stuck in the system. And we want to find homes for them and provide for them. So thanks for joining us.